You're listening to Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, and I am your host, Olivia Fierro, and we are officially into fall and into the spooky season, this being Halloween week. So it is definitely time to cozy up with a good book. Maybe even plan a nice weekend getaway, unwind, have some peace and quiet. On second thought, let's not do that, because when you plan a nice getaway in a secluded space, it ends in murder, or at least it does in the wild mind of our guest today. Lisa Unger is a fantastic master of suspense, and her new book is Secluded Cabin Sleeps Six. She is just, this is going to get into your mind. It is an absolute page turner. If you're not familiar with Lisa, which I'm sure you are, let me just remind you, she is a New York Times best-selling author of 20 books and counting. I mean, wow, she is churning them out. Such an incredible list. Her most recent book, prior to this new one, her 2020 release was Last Girl Ghosted, and that is in paperback now, so that's always great. And her 2020 novel, Confessions on the 745, is headed to Netflix. So lots to talk about today. But the new one is Secluded Cabin Sleeps Six, and that is published November the 8th, and she will be celebrating that here in Phoenix at the Poisoned Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale at 7 p.m. Lisa, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Olivia, and thanks for having me on.
Ooh, this book got in my mind. It was so much fun. So set the scene for Secluded Cabin Sleep Six.
Okay, so when we first sort of, start our visit to the secluded cabin, we meet Hannah and Mako. They're a brother and sister, and they're headed to a remote getaway with their spouses and their family friend and their family friend's mysterious new boyfriend. And so they're looking for like a luxurious getaway, to disconnect from the crazy busyness of their modern life. And so they're all headed out to this secluded cabin in the woods. But of course, there's a storm brewing and cell phone service is, a little spotty. And in the dark, just out of sight, there's a stranger lurking in the shadows, and the stranger is running a dark agenda that is unknown to the group gathering in the cabin. So, what could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Books like this, it's so funny. I feel like there's got to be some sort of association, like mass class action litigation against authors like you from like Verbo, which they say now instead of VRBO, or Airbnb, because this always, there's got to be somebody who's the caretaker, who is a creeper, who's a little too paying a little too much attention to detail, if you know what I mean. And it is just I always think about those situations. Like, my mind does work that way. Like, what is up with these people? Are there cameras in this house? Like, what's going on? So it feeds my paranoia.
Totally. So, and this is what inspired me, of course, because, I'm a thriller writer, and I basically can't even go on vacation, because anytime I have too much time on my hands, like, my brain is going to spin up some dark scenario. So we did, in fact, rent a bunch of really beautifully appointed cabins deep in the woods. Some of them were in the Blue Ridge area of Georgia. Some of them were in the Asheville area of North Carolina during the pandemic, because we wanted these kind of socially distanced vacations. And, we would get out there, and it would be like, super remote, beautiful, very relaxing, but, so dark and quiet and really isolated. And what about that door code? Does everybody get the same code, or is it new for everyone? But that's like just me, that's the way my mind works. And so that was definitely one of the leaping off points for Secluded Cabin Sleep Six. Although we did have a perfectly lovely time, and nothing horrible happened.
No one was murdered. There was no murder. There was no anything that you would want to write about necessarily. I do feel like when spending time with a fiction author has got to be so much fun if you could hop into the brain, or just say, like, give me the situation. Like, we're out at a hotel pool. Like, who do you think could kill who here? Like, who's plotting against each other? Like, who's hiding a deep, dark secret? Obviously, you've got to just be seeing this stuff everywhere you go, right?
I kind of do. And it's probably why I'm a fiction writer in the first place, because I think I remember that even from childhood, I always had this really dark and twisted imagination and, just a lot of curiosity about people and what makes people tick, and just very interested from an early age in psychology and why people do the things they do. And, what turns one person into a hero, what turns another person into a villain. And so I always had these like really deep, dark questions, even as a kid, like at inappropriately early age, I was thinking about these things. So I think that's probably why, and probably why most true crime fiction writers turn to fiction. It's like we just have all these questions and nobody's going to answer them unless we answer them for ourselves. So that's part of the reason, I'm sure.
That probably gives comfort to parents who might have a child that be like, they have
exactly.
kind of
Don't worry about it.
They have kind of a dark obsession, with a lot of things. I hope they turn out okay. It's either going to be in prison or on the New York Times bestseller list. Let's hope for the
exactly.
Times. So, and my compliments to you, because what you did in particular with this book is really kind of dive into the complexities of family relationships and of social dynamics of a group and how we fall into patterns. So particularly with Hannah and Mako, who are adult siblings, but we fall into roles with each other where we learn to, be the person who cleans up after somebody, so to speak, in a variety of ways, or makes excuses for people, or forms a habit of maybe dismissing the things that are most problematic about somebody in our lives because we want to keep them in our lives. And so we can kind of explain away almost anything and sort of compartmentalize almost anything to keep a relationship afloat. And so there's a really interesting, very rich and complicated history in this family.
Yes, definitely. And I think that, this is something that I tend to dive into a lot in my novels. I tend to really explore those family dynamics because I think that there's like, in a societal sense, there's this picture, especially like as the holidays approach, right? There's this picture of like the perfect family gathering where everybody kind of gets together and love and support and laughter, and everything's perfect. And, there aren't these like sort of subterranean dynamics. And I think that like I've never met a family like that in the real world, right? And most of us have very complicated family dynamics. There's like this incredible twist, especially you see it between, Mako and Hannah, this incredible twist of like sort of love and anger and rivalry. And, Hannah is like sort of cast at, has been cast in the role of the good girl, the one who gets, Mako and her best friend, Mako's ex Cricket, out of trouble all the time. And so that's her role within, this family of friends. And then I'm always sort of interested too in the idea of the spouse, when the spouse comes in to sort of the extended family, they bring a whole new perspective to things. Like they bring an outsider's perspective. And yet this is the person that you chose. And then you become the family of origin for your children. So I'm always really super interested and definitely did a deep dive in Secluded Cabin into, what makes us a family? Is it biology? Is it action? Is it choice? Is it, is it all those things? So that was definitely a big theme for me in this book.
And not to give anything away, but you feel for Hannah in particular because she's a new mom and she is going through, everybody can, if you're a parent, you can remember that time period of just how frazzled you are, how exhausted you are, how stressful everything is, how scary everything is. You're so worried. Your responsibility to yourself, to protect yourself, to keep yourself around for your child, to protect your child at all costs. Every single thing feels fragile and tenuous and scary. And so this girl really just needs a nice chill getaway. But a nice chill getaway doesn't make for an interesting book, right?
Right. She really did need a vacation. She's not going to get one, but that is really what she needed. That's what all new moms kind of need, like they need that moment where they learn how to be themselves again. after having a baby, especially that first baby. I mean, I remember when I had my daughter, like that, just those incredibly intense moments of like, I have this new identity as a mom. I have this gigantic responsibility to this tiny little person. I'm still myself. I still want to be myself, and just that tension of all those different pieces, and how it does take a while for you to kind of get your sea legs, and like, how can you still be a couple, with your husband when all of a sudden your identity has been like kind of subsumed by your little one. So definitely, again, that, was on my mind. And I wish Hannah had had a more restful time, but like you say, it's not a thriller.
No, that would not make a thriller, right? If it was just a peaceful retreat with a lot of meditation and getting to sleep in real late. Uninterrupted sleep. Uninterrupted sleep is wonderful to experience, but it's not that interesting to read about.
Right.
Tell me a little bit, Lisa, about your process and how you begin when you're sitting down for a novel. Is everything plotted out? Are you a crazy, like, have you got a big board where you've got everything going on? Or are you one of those people who is able to sit down just with a character or one small kernel of an idea and you let yourself go?
Yeah, it usually starts with something like a visit to Secluded Cabin. Like, it usually starts with a thing, like an event, something I did, something I'm obsessed about. In this case, it was also a little bit about, DNA testing. I have kind of an ongoing obsession with that as a topic. And so what usually happens is like, there's a thing or a couple of things that lead me to doing like a lot of research. And the best way I can describe it is like, if that research connects to something larger that's going on with me, then I tend to start hearing a voice or voices in this case, and I follow those voices through the manuscript. I'm not one to outline. I don't, I know some people do that, very, very diligently. They have an outline of their book and character sketches and stuff. I really don't. I don't have that, that kind of a process. I do have these very powerful voices in my head, and I might have some kind of loose idea of what the book is going to be. I might have some kind of vibe, some kind of general vibe, but when I sit down, I don't know what's going to happen day to day. I don't know who's going to show up. I don't know what they're going to do. And I certainly don't know how the book is going to end.
Seriously.
If I did, if I knew, I couldn't write it, because I write for the same reason that I read, because I want to know what's going to happen to the characters living in my head. So that's the way I've written every single novel. And, that's my process.
That blows my mind, because to me, I always feel like, especially with a psychological thriller and things where it's so intricately woven and there's lots of little hints, but I mean things have to roll out in such a very specific way to reveal what's been going on all along. And the many things that have been going on, and maybe the things that we thought were going on were not going on. So to me, it always seems like people would have to begin with the ending. It's got to be, I mean, what a wild ride to be able to have that kind of creative voices going on in your own head and find yourself to be surprised along the way.
Yeah, it can be kind of a wild ride. And, I'm sure it's easier to do it the other way. But I just find that, this is how my mind works. It's almost like, I've been a reader all my life. Most of my education is centered on writing and literature. And I feel like to a really large extent, like I've sort of internalized the form of the novel, like to the extent that it's almost the way my brain works. Like you find that, these two different camps, but the people who write the way I write, most of us have been writing since we were kids. And, it's almost like there's a part of your brain that never got told it had to stop telling stories, and for me, it's like, it's almost like the subconscious knows the story better than my conscious mind does, because like I'll write something and I don't know, or somebody will show up and I don't really know what it's doing there or why that person, what role that person is going to have. And I might be writing for another 50 pages before I go, oh, That's it. That's why. And so then I already had that piece. And then, of course, this is all first draft stuff. There's always, there's multiple drafts where, you go back again and again to make sure everything works. And, to make sure you brought the reader along on your reader's journey. It's a multi-layered process for sure.
Wow, that is so interesting. As I understand it, you are also part of an organization of thriller writers, right? And
yes, I am.
That's right. As co-president, no less. So
that's right, co-president, along with my good friend and New York Times bestselling author Greg Hurwitz. We are the co-presidents of the International Thriller Writers, ITW.
So do you find, I mean, this must be that would be a very interesting space to be socializing with people whose brains are working this way, right? I mean, is it like, it's like you get together for a meeting and it's like Mystery Theater and somebody drops and they're like, somebody killed it. I mean, what happens when writers like yourselves are socializing, and what do you enjoy most about being able to have these friendships with people who are in the same industry?
Oh, yeah, it's such a tremendous gift. I mean, the funny thing that I'll say about thriller writers to begin with is that, and I think that people from other genres have wound up at our conferences and stuff, and almost everybody has commented on how nice crime fiction and thriller mystery writers are, how much we care about each other, how much we support and cross promote each other. And it's such a warm community of, just colleagues and friends. I've been writing a long time. Before that, I was in book publishing, so I've been in publishing since I was 22 years old. So I have, friends, author friends, also editors, agents, people from all over the industry. So gathering at Thriller Fest is probably one of the highlights of the year. And it's also very comforting too, because, I have writers in my day-to-day life, here in St. Pete. There are a couple of great writers that are local to the area, and, you kind of connect with them and stuff. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a relief just to be with other writers, because a lot of times you think, well, am I, I'm the only one who's thinking like this. Am I crazy? And then you get together with all, this group of people and you're like, oh, we're all a little bit like this. So
well, that is
very, most of us are telling stories.
It is very funny. And I'm thinking of an interview I did with Sally Hepworth, how she was saying, people so great. And somebody who is kind of that embodiment of just bubbly and colorful and in wardrobe and personality and adorable, and how people expect those who write these types of books to be kind of dark and brooding and, very, very serious and, mysterious in their own persona. But it's often quite the opposite.
Yeah, and I get that a lot. I'll show up at, at a bookstore and people will just kind of be looking at me a little strangely, and then somebody will inevitably say, oh, you seem so nice. You seem so normal. And I was like, well, I am nice. I am normal-ish.
My brain's not so normal the way those stories
not normal, but I can still, go out in public and, behave myself.
Yeah, very important to note. So have no fear, Arizonans who are listening to this. You are safe to go into the Poisoned Pen in Scottsdale for the big book promotion and to meet Lisa, who will not be scary at all. She'll be very friendly. Very friendly indeed. Tell me about this journey to Netflix that's happening with your other book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Confessions on the 745, which was my 2020 release, it was discovered by Jessica Alba. She read the book and she absolutely fell in love with it. And so she brought it to her production company and they brought it to Netflix, and Netflix really loved the book and, the passion of the team, 3 Arts and Jessica Alba, really, their passion for the project is just, tremendous, off the charts. And then they were able to sign on Charisse Castro-Smith, who wrote Encanto. So she's an Oscar-winning writer. And together, they're just this incredibly powerhouse team of women that are, creating this project. So we're moving along. I don't know, when it's going to actually find its way on the screen, but it's super exciting to have these just incredibly talented women, excited about the project and, moving in the right direction.
Wow, that is exciting. And it's sure, I mean, there are so many books get tapped for development, and it's such an emotional roller coaster because we know that most projects don't come to fruition. But when you have a big celebrity who says, I want to make this, things go very differently.
Yeah, we hope so. And I've been doing this a long time, so I'm always like, cautiously optimistic. But it does seem like, it's such an amazing team, and I'm so thrilled. And their vision for the book is so, compatible with mine, and I'm just really excited about where we're going with it.
You mentioned 2020, and we know that over these couple of years, I think that a lot of the fiction that we're reading right now obviously has been shaped and informed by going through a pandemic, a sense of isolation, boredom. I mean, just how everything changed for everybody. Also, the way that book promotion and publicity and sort of your industry had to really change and pivot and go virtual and all of that. So what did you gain from that? Because I know that a lot of authors, it seemed to be a very successful space where you were reaching maybe more people in a quote unquote intimate way or personal way from home. But what do you look forward to the most about being back out in the world as you share this book?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely, an interesting moment, during the pandemic where, the appearances all became virtual. And, I basically, this is my office. I basically moved into this chair in front of this bookshelf in March of 2020. And I've more or less been here ever since. And I thought, one of the really, interesting things about it was that, when you had a book event, and it could be anywhere, it could be in Arizona or Houston or New York, and you were doing it from your home, my home in Florida, and then you would tune in and there'd be people from all over the world. I have a global readership. And so people from all over the world suddenly could come to these events. And then I heard from people who were like, I've never been able to come to a book event before. No book events come to my town, or I'm home with small children, or caring for an aging parent, or, there might be some physical challenges that keep people from getting out of the house and doing something that, many people take for granted. Like you can just go to a book signing in the evening. Right. So for those folks, it was like sort of a new day. They were able to come to things that they'd never been able to come to before. And I thought that was really fantastic. And I hope that, we can maintain that virtual component so that people can join. But there's just there's a special kind of joy and feeling. Of course, the book tour is it's a lot. It's a lot of travel, but there's a special kind of joy in being in a bookstore, surrounded by books and people, and physically signing the book and hugging people and shaking hands and stuff. And, I'm a little bit of an introvert, so I wouldn't have thought that I would miss it as much as I did. But being back in person appearances and stuff is very nourishing in a way that I didn't expect. So it's been a real joy to be back out there and connecting with people in the real world again as well.
Even as much success as you've had, and how long you've been at this and had people devoted to knowing that they're going to read the next Lisa Unger book immediately when it comes out, it's got to still be kind of a wow, surreal when you see people in real life just holding your books, when you see them reading. I mean, if you get on a plane or something and somebody is reading your book, or if somebody is come to hear what you have to say about your writing. I mean, there's so many people who aspire to writing a book, and their stories will never reach anybody but who they're torturing in their own home, maybe, if they're not too shy about sharing that. So it has just got to be still a magical thing.
It is 100% a magical thing every single time. I've been writing since I was a kid. I never wanted to write, wanted to do anything else but write, ever. And so the fact that I get to do it, and I get to create, to live in this world of stories and characters, and then I get to share them with people, and people actually, like not my mom, not just my mom, not just my grandma, who's like one of my first readers, and, like the people that, like most of us start out, with just like these very small events and like, a smattering of, friends and family that you could kind of strong arm to coming to your book signing. And then over the years, if you're lucky, you see that grow and you have, people come and, in my case, they've, I see people and they've been reading since my first book, which published in 2002. And, to have that long time relationship with readers and people that you connect with, they communicate with you via email and in social media. And then just to have this like long relationship with those readers. I mean, it truly is a dream come true. And every single time I see my book out in the world, or when that first, bound copy comes in the mail, it never stops being a thrill. And I never lose my gratitude for that.
Oh, that's so cool. Last thing, if you tell me, are you a very disciplined, structured person? Like, how do you plan your day? As I'm sure with you, you're probably already finishing up your next book, right?
I am. Yeah.
So you're always on a calendar timeline, because now your publisher wants these books. We want to have one every single year, and readers want them every single year. So how do you approach your writing? Is it the same? We know the place now, but is it the same time of day every day? Like, what does that look like? Is there a certain snack, a certain beverage, a certain whatever that has to be part of it? Is it same time every day? Are you loose and you let it kind of grab you when you're feeling it? And what would your advice be also to somebody who aspires to write and wants to kind of sit down and get to work on something, but they find the process intimidating?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me, my golden creative hours are from 5 a.m. to noon. That's when I'm, I'm still in that kind of dream brain, which is where I like to be. And, it's those early hours, especially before the day gets started, before, that 9:30, 10 o'clock hour hits, where people are at their desks and, things start happening, like those early morning hours for me are still golden. There have been times in my life in different stages of my daughter's life, when I haven't always been able to get those early hours, or when I had to get even earlier hours because I knew I wasn't going to get, that 5 a.m. slot. So it might have been 3 a.m. Now it's more like 6 a.m., like that kind of a thing. And it has shifted with her schedule. But those early morning hours are really my most important creative time, like especially that block between 7 a.m. and noon. That's like, that's golden. And then that's not to say that I don't write at other times in the day, especially as I'm approaching a deadline, or, when at the end of the book, things get very, very intense, so you're kind of thinking about it and writing all the time. So there was like a phase towards the end of the book where that's true, but most of the year that's my time. And it is pretty much every day. I don't plan not to write, like, maybe you're sick, your kid is sick, the dog threw up at 4 a.m. Like, we all have a life, right? Like that gets in the way. But like the most important thing is that you get to those pages and get into the manuscript almost every day. That for me is the way it works. And it's kind of a continuum. So there's not really a moment where one project is ended and there's going to be a big chunk of time while I'm thinking about what comes next. It's always like a continuum of writing, reading, researching, writing again, all that's like a circle. So that's kind of how it works for me. And, but it is important, I think, to have your time, like to know what your time is. It may not be, for aspiring writers, it may not be 4 a.m. or 6 a.m. It may be, midnight or 11 or some other time where you have a block that just belongs to you. But the most important advice I can give to aspiring writers is to find that time and schedule that time the way you would schedule anything else that's important to you. If you had to, if you wanted to get in shape, you'd figure out a time to go to the gym. Or if if you had to meet a friend, you would schedule time to meet your friend, and you would honor that because it was important to you. So this is the same. A lot of times with writers, we don't honor that. Like maybe there's not a lot of cultural permission for us to write. But if you have the desire to write, you have to schedule the time and you have to honor the schedule the way you would honor anything that's important to you. And you'd be amazed what you could do with even an hour or 2 hours a couple days a week.
Great advice. And to wrap up, in your professional opinion, is a DNA kit a good gift or a bad gift? A key plot point in Secluded Cabin Sleeps 6.
I don't want to get in trouble with the DNA testing kit, even any more than I want to get in trouble with the Airbnb industry. But I will say, do some research before you spit into that vial.
You never know what's going to happen. At least, yeah, exactly. Choose it on your own, maybe, right? Buy it for yourself and don't thrust it upon an entire family if they haven't expressed an interest in getting that this year. Well, Lisa, it is an absolute pleasure to talk to you. The book is a total page turner. I also was lucky enough to listen to it on audio as well, and the audio is really good too. So it is a win-win all the way around. Secluded Cabin Sleeps 6, November the 8th is pub day, and if you are a local listener or viewer here, you will be able to see Lisa and get a signed copy of this book at the Poisoned Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale at 7 p.m. on that very day. So celebrate with her there, and thank you so much.
Oh, Olivia, thank you so much. You're such a great interviewer, and this was so much fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub, and Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.
This is Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.